Of our 50th, recording in progress. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the final session of our 50th anniversary virtual conference series. I'm Mike Bollinger, the Executive Director at Seed Savers Exchange, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. Since we began this journey back in the spring, we've gathered over the last 3 months and heard from farmers, cultural knowledge holders, researchers, gardeners, grassroots leaders, and each session, I think, has really offered a different lens into the work of seed saving, and together remind us that seeds are much more than genetic material. Their memory, their relationship, their resilience, their care. Across these past months, we've explored the many ways that this work shows up in people's lives, from community gardens and seed libraries to indigenous foodways and international conservation strategies. It's really humbling and inspiring to witness the depth and knowledge and commitment by so many of you in this community. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you've been with us since the beginning, thank you. You've helped shape this gathering into something meaningful and alive. As we close out the virtual series, we want to invite you to what comes next. If these sessions have sparked something for you, if you found yourself, nodding along, scribbling notes, feeling a sense of connection, we'd love to see you in person. On August 8th and 9th, that's coming up very quickly. We all know that here at Seed Savers Exchange, we're hosting a 2-day 50th anniversary celebration and conference at Heritage Farm in Decorah, Iowa. It's a chance to walk the land, where this work began, connect face to face, maybe get your hands in the soil a little and learn from one another in a truly special setting. So pack your bags. We'd love to have you here. To start today's session, we're honored to begin with a keynote that speaks to the heart of Seed Savers Exchange's mission and really the larger movement that we're all a part of. And to introduce our keynote speaker, I'm happy to turn things over to our Preservation Director, Michael Washburn. Michael.
Hello and welcome to the Seed Savers Exchange virtual conference series. It's growing together, past, present, and the future. And like Mike said, I'm Michael Washburn. I'm the Preservation Director here at Seed Savers Exchange, and so I'll be your host for the session. Now, before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge our community agreements. And so we ask that all participants in growing together, past, present, and future, be respectful and be curious, be patient, speak from your own experiences, and try to avoid jargon, and be conscious of intent versus impact, and take space and make space, and take care of self. And by embracing these community agreements, we embrace a collective responsibility to create spaces that are respectful, inclusive, and empowering for all. And then before we continue, I want to take a moment to extend a heartfelt thank you to Decorah Bank and Trust for their generous support of today's virtual conference. Their commitment to Seed Savers Exchange and their hospitality and hosting us is helping us make this event possible. So thank you, Decorah Bank and Trust, for being such a generous host. So I am truly excited to introduce Dr. Susan Pell, who will give our keynote session titled Advancing Science at Public Gardens Through Collaboration. Now, Dr. Susan Pell is the Executive Director of the United States Botanic Garden and an expert in the systematics of the cashew family, Anacardiaceae. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Biology from St. Andrews University in North Carolina and a PhD in Plant Biology from Louisiana State University. And Susan has spent her career in public gardens as a botanist, educator, and leader, and she has traveled the world to collect plants for scientific study. At the U.S. Botanic Garden, she is committed to helping the garden achieve its mission to inspire people to appreciate, study, and conserve plants to enrich society locally and globally. She is dedicated to diversifying the garden's collections and offerings and serving its diverse visitorship. Now, if you have any questions for Dr. Pell, please enter them in the chat, and we'll have time at the end for a quick Q&A. And so with that, Dr. Pell, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here. I've got quite a few slides today, so I'm going to get that shared with you all. All right. So as was just said, I work at the United States Botanic Garden, and I've worked actually at several major public gardens in the United States, including Brooklyn Botanic Garden and the New York Botanical Garden. And I love public gardens. I love plants, and I really love that we can share the wonder of plants with our visitors. Here at the US Botanic Garden, we have over 1 million visitors every year, and we're able to engage those people that come through our doors in the wonder of plants and really teaching them about the diversity of our collection, the importance of plants to people, and connecting them with plants through the food that they eat, the clothing that they wear, the houses that they live in, and all of the other uses that we have for plants. Many people, when they think of a public garden, they might think of, a beautiful display. They might think of a rose garden, maybe a spring floral display or a fall floral display. They may think of exhibits, holiday shows. This is our train show from a few years ago. They may think of the horticultural expertise that is at public gardens and the people that they can learn from, techniques in horticulture, in seed saving, and propagation. All sorts of different horticultural techniques are taught at public gardens through employees, through volunteers, and through contractors that help us to spread our mission to teach people about the importance of plants. But also at public gardens are very rich collaborations advancing plant science. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today, is the science that's done at gardens, and particularly the collaborative science that is done in gardens. And I will say the vast majority, almost all science that's done at gardens is in collaboration with other individuals, other institutions, other public gardens, universities, research institutions. And I'm going to talk about some of those entities in the United States and around the world that do conservation science work at public gardens and their partners as well. So all of the sort of core operational foci of gardens include education, horticulture, conservation. They're really all rooted in science. And certainly here at the US Botanic Garden, we are very science forward. So everything that we do has science underlying it, whether it's our horticultural practices, where we're trying to learn more about the plants in nature and the conditions that they're in, and so that we can mimic those in our cultivated conditions, or whether we're having an educational program and we're ensuring that the scientific information we're sharing is completely accurate and up to date. Science at public gardens is super diverse. I'm going to talk about some of that diversity today, but I'm just really going to scratch the surface of what's done at gardens. Some things that I'm not going to really get into are things like genomics, which is looking at the sort of function of genes. A lot of gardens also do morphological research where they're looking at the anatomy and the morphology of plants for various reasons. I'll talk a little bit about that in the context of systematics, but just wanted to give you an idea of the diversity of science that's at gardens, from engaging in field collecting to bring back both living collections and natural history collections, to studying those plants in herbaria, which are natural history collections of plants, to educating future scientists, to doing laboratory research to better understand the plants themselves and how they're related to each other in our environment. So the outline for my talk today is this. So we're going to go through some types of science. That's going to take the most of the time in the presentation. Then I'll talk about some of the facilities, the science-related facilities that public gardens have, some of the training and engagement that we do, and give you just a few example gardens and the breadth of the work that they do. All right, so I'm going to start by talking about systematics and being mindful of not using jargon. I'm defining systematics here. And really, this is a field within biology that encompasses essentially 3 tasks or 3 fields. And that is delimiting organisms, which basically is just identification. The other is naming and categorizing organisms. This is taxonomy. And often identification and taxonomy are done at the same time, so that when you see a rose bush, you're both identifying it as a rose bush and you're classifying it as a rose bush, or the genus Rosa in the Rosaceae family. The third category of systematics is determining relationships among organisms, and this is called phylogenetics. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So first, identification. Identification, and this is something that you are all very familiar with. I'm sure you do this all the time, probably daily. Identification of plants is determined by a combination of morphological, sometimes anatomical characteristics, and occasionally also reproductive and population genetics information, but also other contexts, where they are growing in the environment, where they are growing in the world. So the geography is important, the sort of location of the plant is important to help us understand the identification of it. And then taxonomy is really the sort of formal outcome of identification. It's when we're giving the thing a name. So we've identified something, we have a tree, it's got palmate leaves, it has little winged fruits, and we then say, oh, that's a maple tree. So we then identified it as a maple and classified it as a maple. And taxonomy is really just the naming of organisms, grouping them into larger categories that constitutes a formal classification. So it could be a species, it could be a genus, it could be a family, etc. So these pictures here are all pictures of the cashew family, the Anacardiaceae, which is, of course, the best family on Earth, and includes things like mangoes and pistachios, cashews, but also poison ivy. And I'll talk a little bit more about Anacardiaceae as we go through the talk today. So what are the products of taxonomy and systematics? Well, one major product is floristics. And this is really the study of the plants that occur in a particular area. And in some cases, the plants of a certain taxonomic group that occur in an area. So you might study the coffee family of Costa Rica, something like that. Or you might study the entire flora of Costa Rica, or maybe just, one single area within Costa Rica, maybe the Pacific coast, something like that. Floristics are floras. So these are just some examples that are all created by public gardens in partnership. But floras include taxonomic descriptions, so descriptions of species, genera, families, keys to identification. Typically, these are stagnant keys, where they're static keys where you're looking at a key on a paper. You've got two choices to choose between, and that's taking you down sort of a road of many other choices to make till you get to identification. There, of course, are online identification keys where you can just click a lot of buttons and identify plants much more easily. Also, they include distribution maps, so you know where the plants occur within the sort of confines of the region that the flora is covering. And then also they include botanical illustrations. I'll talk a little bit more about those later, but botanical illustrations are it's an extremely important art form that really enables scientific discovery within itself. So just some of the examples on this slide. The Plants of Pennsylvania is a product of the Morris Arboretum, which is just outside of Philadelphia. The Flora of China is a collaborative product of some Chinese institutions in the Missouri Botanical Garden. And the Flora of Tropical East Africa is collaboration with the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, which is just outside of London, and several entities within East Africa. Other publications that are the results of systematics are some within horticultural science. So people publish books on horticultural groups, such as begonias, where they might include both wild species and also cultivated species. There are, of course, lots of different natural history books, including this publication out of the New York Botanical Garden called Flowering Plants of the Neotropics, and lots of different reference books that help people either in growing plants or maybe growing them more sustainably. And these are some examples from this slide are the Climate Conscious Gardener is from Brooklyn Botanic Garden, as is the Begonia book. The Fern book is from the New York Botanical Garden. And so why is it important to have people who study systematics at public gardens? It's really wonderful to understand the flora of different areas and to understand more in depth different plant species, genera, families. But what are the other applications at a public garden for people who are systematics experts? Well, this is an example from a few years ago here at the US Botanic Garden. This is a vanilla orchid that we have growing up on one of the walls in our main room in the conservatory, the main entrance room in the conservatory. It's called the Garden Court. And this is an area of the conservatory that features plants that are useful to people, and particularly lots of food and spice and plants and textile plants, that sort of thing. So this plant was growing for about 5 years, and it finally bloomed. And we were very happy to see it bloom. We were starting to hand pollinate it so that we could get some vanilla production. It typically flowers in the spring and it fruits in the summer. And I had experience when I was at Brooklyn Botanic Garden of harvesting these fruits and processing them to make vanilla. You sort of have to go through a process of sort of sweating the fruits, kind of heating them up and keeping them moist, etc. And so I harvested some of these our first year, and I was actually on a road trip with my family. So I did a little bit of a modified approach to the processing of the fruits, including putting them on the dash of my rented van. And I had them, in process for several weeks, and I never got any vanillin produced. So none of that very characteristic vanilla smell was coming from these fruits. And I was very perplexed by this because when I was in Brooklyn, literally, if you just let the fruit rot on the ground of the conservatory, it would make vanillin. I mean, it's quite easy to do this, and I was completely failing. And so I thought, I wonder, the fruits also struck me as a bit misshapen, a bit larger than what I was used to, and the vanilla planifolia, which is the vanilla of commerce that I had previous experience with. So I asked our specialist, our orchid specialist at the time, who is a systematist, if he could identify this, make sure that when it blooms the next year, that we do actually have vanilla planifolia. This is the flower of our plant here on the right, and this is the flower of vanilla planifolia. And I hope you can see that those two flowers are not the same. They're quite different. They are both in the genus Vanilla, which is a climbing orchid, but they are not the same species. And in fact, we had a completely different species. We had purchased this plant from a commercial grower. They sold it to us as Vanilla planifolia. And as I said, we had it for 5 years before it even bloomed. So it's really hard to identify plants morphologically by just their leaves, especially when there's closely related plants that have similar morphology of their vegetative structures. So we identified this as a species native to South America, primarily Brazil, and this plant is not known to make vanillin at all. And I can confirm it does not make vanillin. So this is just one example of the importance of really having people at gardens who can identify plants and correct the errors in our collections databases. All right, so then the last category within systematics is phylogenetics. And phylogenetics primarily uses molecular data, so DNA sequence data primarily, to generate evolutionary trees that are called phylogenies. These are, of course, again, Anacardiaceae examples here. These are two flowers from the Anacardiaceae family. And sometimes other characteristics are used to make phylogenies. Sometimes people will use structural characteristics or biochemical characteristics, but usually it's molecular characteristics. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of phylogenies or evolutionary trees and how we kind of can use these to gain knowledge, information about plants beyond just how they're related to each other. So we can use phylogenies to trace the evolution of different characteristics, or in some cases to trace the ecological roles of species. So here is a phylogeny, again, of the Anacardiaceae, and also its sister family, the frankincense and myrrh family. So we have the cashew family on the top, and that smaller little group there with the yellow bar beside it is the frankincense and myrrh family. And don't get too detailed on this. What you need to sort of see here is that those dark black bars and the solid black bars and those little kind of black and orange boxes there. And what we found is when we looked at the occurrence of wind dispersal within the family, so morphological characteristic, and we also looked at where these plants grow, if they were in wet environments, if they were in dry environments, or if they occurred in both environments within the lineage. And what we found was that there was a statistically significant correlation, sort of a causal effect relationship between an ancestral colonization of a dry habitat and the evolution of wind dispersal. And this is also somewhat intuitive. Dry forests are deciduous. They lose their leaves. There's a lot more space for wind to sort of blow through the forest. And so we would sort of expect for plants to take advantage of that and to have evolved wind dispersal to be able to move their seeds around in the forest when it does not have any leaves in it. But if this was confirmed by tracing these characteristics on the phylogeny. As I mentioned, poison ivy is a member of the cashew family, and poison ivy has a compound in it called urushiol that causes contact dermatitis. And if you ever see poison ivy plant that's been a little bit damaged, it'll have kind of black spots on the leaves. You can see that actually in the picture on the top right there, which is not poison ivy, but it's a close relative of it. It's poisonwood. And those black dots are the urushiol oxidizing when it is exposed to air. So if you sort of damage the plant, or if you cut a poison ivy, if you cut the stem, you'll see sort of a black ring form just inside the bark. And that's the urushiol. If we look at the evolution of toxicity, this ability to cause contact dermatitis within the Anacardiaceae, what we see is that it's evolved many times in the family, but that once it evolves, most of the things that sort of evolve later from those lineages also cause contact dermatitis. So over 32 of the roughly 80 genera of Anacardiaceae do cause contact dermatitis. Some of them are also spiny, so they'll cut you and give you dermatitis. All right, I could talk all day about poison ivy, but I will not do that. All right, so the next sort of category of science, broad category of science that's done at public gardens is horticulture. And this is sort of a very large field that includes many different techniques, but including, propagation, breeding, cultivation, also conservation horticulture. So applying the knowledge and skills, practice of horticulture to conserve plants, both in nature and also in cultivation. And also education, really important for us to have expert level horticultural knowledge to be able to share that with the public. The living collection of the U.S. Botanic Garden includes about 50,000 plants, and we accession, or we keep detailed records of about 10,000 of those plants. And somewhere over 500 of those are vulnerable or at risk for extinction in the wild. So we sort of pay extra special attention to those 10,000 accession plants, and even more special attention to those that are threatened for extinction in the wild. And there are several different collections that are really foci of the garden, including U.S. native plants, both from the Mid-Atlantic region where we are located here in Washington, D.C., but also other parts of the United States. We have collections from the Southwest and the Southeast as well, which we can grow both indoors and also in some of our outdoor gardens that are protected from the winter. We also have quite a large collection of orchids and desert plants, carnivorous plants, and economic plants, as well as aroids. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about our aroid collection in a few minutes here. The orchid collection is actually the largest single family collection within our accession collection. And we have almost 3,000 orchid plants in that living collection, and around 180 of those are vulnerable to extinction. So really, again, those are the plants that we're paying close attention to. And I'll just kind of pause to say that this living collection is really the core of what makes us a museum and a botanic garden versus just a public garden. The botanic garden accreditation that we have really signifies the engagement that we have, the science that we do, and that we're using our collection to advance scientific knowledge. It also allows us to be an accredited museum through the American Alliance of Museums, because we have lots of policies in place and procedures in place that sort of govern our care of that living collection as well. And we don't just keep our plants to ourselves, we share our collection with other organizations. We actually, as I didn't mention this earlier, but we are a federal government entity. We are actually in the legislative branch of the federal government. And because we are a federal government entity, we have to have special legal authorities to do some of the things that other public gardens can just do freely, including exchanging plant material. So we have special authority that allows us to exchange plant material. And we do that with other public gardens, with research institutions, with universities, in order to make sure that our collection, especially the most vulnerable plants within our collection, are backed up in other living collections elsewhere. So what are those transferable skills within horticulture, and how do we utilize that in our scientific work? So horticultural skills greatly contribute to conservation. It's, we have several projects where we are collaborating with a scientist, somebody like me who has a PhD in plant biology, who really maybe doesn't know much about growing plants, but they really know about the science of the plant. We'll collaborate with them, with our horticulturists going into the field, so that our horticulturists can bring their horticulture knowledge and skills to be able to collect plants to bring them back into our living collection. And also then to make observations in the field of the growing conditions of the plants in the wild to be able to mimic those in our conservatory and greenhouses. Also, public engagement is really enhanced through both the plants that we have in our collection that are displayed in the context of their scientific knowledge, and also our experts in those collections that can engage with the public about the collections. We have quite a few displays that are based on the sort of ecology of the habitats that the plants occur in. So this is our World Deserts House. It features plants from arid environments all over the world. This is a carnivorous plant collection display that we have that features also carnivorous plants from different places around the world that are all have all evolved in habitats that are sort of wet and have sphagnum moss, so sort of stay wet, and that are also nutrient poor, so have low levels of typically nitrogen and phosphorus. Here's an outdoor bog that we have. This is a collaboration with the Atlanta Botanical Garden. They actually provided the plants initially for this for a display in 2019, and we've maintained that collection. This is the sort of last of the rain gardens within one of our outdoor gardens, where if the other rain gardens in the garden kind of overflow, the water comes into here. And as you can see in that picture on the right, we've got standing water there. The good news is these are all bog plants, and they're adapted to being inundated with water. And so that's that regular inundation when we have large rain events poses no risk to them at all, and they thrive in this bed. And then, of course, we have displays of just really charismatic plants, and there's great value in having plants that are going to get the public excited. For a lot of public gardens, that value is a monetary value and an educational value, so that they're actually making a lot of revenue by the tens of thousands of people coming to see these plants. And also they're able to educate people not only about this plant, but the importance of plant conservation, and just to begin to bring awareness to people of the plight of plants around the world and the different threats to their conservation. Over 100 gardens have the corpse flower, which is Amorphophallus titanum, in their collections, and many, many dozens of universities and research institutions do as well. And there's a large network of gardens that really share pollen with each other, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, and really are trying to use these charismatic collections to advance plant conservation. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the corpse flower because it is such a cool plant, and we do a lot of different really neat science projects around it. So this is a line from many years ago, actually, outside the conservatory. That was about a 2-hour line. It wrapped around our entire block, and that was a line to see the corpse flower bloom for the first time in about 7 years at the US Botanic Garden at that time. We now have a very large collection, and we have blooms almost every year. But still, even though these blooms have become more regular, they are still a major draw for visitors to public gardens, and a really wonderful tool for education. On the right, you can see one of our horticulture supervisors, Steve Jones, who is at a teacher training workshop with our learning and engagement team, where he's talking about corpse flower and using it as an example of, again, a charismatic plant that you really can engage people on, but then also to learn more about its biology and its conservation. I mentioned earlier that botanical illustration is an art form that is extremely important to systematics. It's also important to interpretation. This is a wonderful graphic that we worked with a botanical illustrator to develop that shows the life cycle of the corpse flower. And I'm going to go through this in more detail with some photos of plants from our collection. But basically, if you look at the top and the bottom there, you'll see corm. And this is the underground structure, kind of like a potato that the plant grows from. And the plant is from that corm stage, which is sort of its dormant stage, and that is underground. It will produce either a bloom or a leaf. So the corm is the stem, and the leaf there, which you can see on the left, is a single leaf that comes out of the corm. And once it senesces, it will go back into dormancy. The plant will go back in dormancy, and then hopefully the next cycle, it will bloom again. So here is that leaf stage on the left, and the beginning of the flower stage on the right, where we've got just a bud coming up. And you can see that leaf bud and that flower bud look really similar to each other. We've gotten pretty good at detecting which is which once they get a little bigger than that stage. But it's quite hard, and we don't really know when it first comes up whether it's going to be a leaf or a bloom. And here's a photo of kind of up close of that corm. This one weighed 99 pounds, but these can weigh over 300 pounds, and they lose a lot of their weight and their volume when they bloom, because that is sort of a resource intensive event where the flower, or the leaf rather, is going to be photosynthesizing and sort of putting a lot of energy into that corm, growing that corm. But once it's blooming, there's not a lot of photosynthesis happening, and so it's using up the stored energy from that corm over time. Here is a corm. This is not Amorphophallus titanum. It's a different species. It's bulbifer. But this is the corm in cross section. We have so many of these plants that we're able to do some really interesting photography and scientific work on them. This one, would be quite damaged by this, but we were able to get this really wonderful picture to kind of show you how the buds come out. So the buds grow from the center of the corm, and there are these layers of bracts that protect the developing leaf or the developing inflorescence that bloom in there. And here is a corpse flower leaf bud, and you can see it sort of tapers kind of straight down, doesn't have a lot of expansion at the base there, kind of a pretty slim bud. And those are going to produce, as I said, a single leaf. So this is the petiole or the stalk of the leaf of the corpse flower. You can see it's quite large. That's my hand, and I have really big hands. So this is a quite big stem. They can weigh, quite big stalk of the leaf rather. They can weigh hundreds of pounds. And when the leaf dies or senesces, it's the bud for the next either bloom or leaf is already kind of coming up in the center of the corm. So again, here you can see that little bloom coming up there with those little protective layers, but also imagine a leaf being over these very large leaves. And what we have found is that if we remove the dying leaf before it rots fully, then we can protect the bud. So we think historically, these things would only bloom, every 5 to 7 years, something like that, maybe 3 to 7 years once they had bloomed initially. And we think that that's probably because the leaves were being left on and allowing the buds to rot. And we've worked with several other gardens to share this knowledge. And what we're seeing across the industry is a lot more success in getting these plants to bloom every, couple of years. So basically going through a cycle of leaf, dormancy, bloom, dormancy, leaf, dormancy, bloom. So kind of blooming and having a leaf in every cycle versus having 5 or 10 cycles in a row with just a leaf. All right, so then the bloom. This is, of course, the most charismatic part of the plant, and it's what people really come to see. And they come to see it for a couple of reasons. One is people really like stinky things that smell like death and poo, which is something that never grows old to me, frankly. And they also really like big things, like the biggest of the things. And the Amorphophallus titanum is the largest unbranched inflorescence in the world. And they are really big, and they're really stinky. They're also very ephemeral. They don't last long at all. So you get the combination of really stinky, really big, and you've got to come right now to see it because it's going to fade fast. And that's what really brings out the crowds. So the scent for these plants in the wild can travel up to a mile away from the plants. And I'll talk more about how that happens in a minute. But they're attracting insects that normally are attracted to carrion, to dead animals. And the insects are coming because they're going to lay their eggs on this dead animal. And they do, in fact, lay their eggs on the plant, thinking that their larvae are going to have something to eat. But they're fooled. They have nothing to eat. And this is what's called brood site deception, or basically mimicking of what normally an insect would lay its eggs on, and just completely fooling them into visiting. And in the process of visiting, they are the pollinators for this plant. So as I said, these are really big. So this is a leaf on the left. These things can be 15 feet tall. And on the right, this is the largest bloom we ever had. So I'm just about 6 feet tall. This bloom was over 9 feet tall. So you can see there's quite a bit of the bloom below me and above me here. That thing was unbelievably enormous. And I've used the word inflorescence earlier, and I'm calling this also a bloom. So this is technically an inflorescence. It's technically a spadix inflorescence. It has this long sort of structure in the middle, and it has this big spade, a big sort of leaf-like structure underneath that. That sort of is almost like a trumpet shape. And that trumpet shape is really what helps helps the stinky compounds that it makes to spread out into the air. On the left side here, you can see the photo of the flowers, the individual flowers of this inflorescence. And an inflorescence is basically just an axis with lots and lots of flowers on it. If you think of something like a corn, like a cob of corn, each of the kernels is from an individual flower. So each of those silks is the sort of stalk, the style of that flower. And you've got hundreds of flowers in that corn cob. So that corn cob is an inflorescence, or it was an inflorescence. Now it's an infructescence. Anyway. So there's your individual flowers. On the bottom, those sort of bulby looking pink things, those are the female flowers. And on the top, the little yellow dots, those are the male flowers. And we capture, because we have such a large collection, I mentioned that we're able to do some scientific work, do dissections, that kind of thing. We're also able to capture lots and lots of different images of these plants, collaborating with photographers. So now we're using botanical illustrators and photographers, lots of wonderful artists that we engage with. We also use model makers here at the garden. And so our photography team that we collaborate with is able to get really high quality photos for us. So here again are those female flowers on the left, and on the right is a thermal image of the spadix, that center part of that inflorescence. And this spadix can heat up over 15 degrees above ambient temperature. So if it's 70 degrees in the greenhouse, that spadix will be 85 or more degrees when it heats up. And it heats up twice in its bloom cycle. First time it heats up, and you can see this is an example from I think it was last year. On June 2nd, we had at 11:45 p.m., it was heating up. This is a photo from that time. And it was heating up then to volatilize the organic compounds that smell like death that the plant makes and to spread them out to attract its pollinators. And essentially, if you think of, if you're chopping up garlic at home, when you're chopping garlic, you can smell the garlic, but nobody else in the house can smell it. Once you put it on that frying pan, the whole house can smell it, right? What you're doing is heating up those compounds and putting them into the air. Same thing with this plant, heating up to spread the scent to attract pollinators. And it's doing that when the female flowers are mature and receptive to being pollinated. About 12 hours later, so here we are at 11:55 a.m. the next day, the male flowers are shedding their pollen. So the female flowers are done being receptive to being pollinated, and the male flowers start shedding their pollen. You can see it sort of comes out in these long strings, really fascinating process. And again, the inflorescence will heat up to send those stinky smell out to attract the pollinators again. We captured this pollen often and from our blooms, and we use it either to pollinate our own plants, or we'll share it with other gardens, other institutions, so that they can pollinate their blooms. And it's a really simple process. We capture it in different ways. So sometimes we'll build sort of a tray underneath the male flowers, waiting for them to fall. And then we'll put those into a vial. The vial will, we've actually tried different storage methods, different temperatures within the refrigerator, freezer, and also just at room temperature. So far, we haven't seen a big difference in the fruit set, but that's one of the things that one of the sort of research projects that we have with the corpse flowers is understanding how can we better store this pollen for use in the future. And then once we pollinate it, you can hopefully see on the left side there, these are the female flowers, and they've got little pollen on their stigmas there. And then they will eventually set fruit, and that fruit will mature over many months on the plant, somewhere between 6 to 12 months it takes them to mature. And then we'll harvest those and grow up plants to share them with other gardens. Now, there's several other research projects that we have been involved with our corpse flower collection. And one of those is that we've contributed tissue to a project led by the Chicago Botanic Garden, where they have collected samples from gardens across the US and throughout Europe of their corpse flower collections to study their genes, to look at, or say their genetics, to look at the pedigree of these plants. So to see how closely related they are to each other. As you, I'm sure, know, inbreeding can be very problematic in plants, and certainly more problematic in animals. And so we're trying to really maintain the genetic diversity of these plants in cultivation, and to really intentionally breed them. Zoos and aquaria have been doing this for a long time. This is something that gardens are pretty new to, actually, because plants are so forgiving. They will reproduce even if they're really closely related to each other. And so we're really trying to very intentionally cross-pollinate from within our collection and within other collections, or two other collections as well. We also contributed tissue samples and an herbarium specimen, or several herbarium specimens, to the U.S. National Herbarium at the National Museum of Natural History, and contributed to their Global Genome Initiative for Gardens, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. If you want to learn more about corpse flowers, you can scan this QR code and go to our website, or you can just do a search for USBG corpse flower, and you'll see all kinds of photos and videos and information about our collection and how we use it to advance conservation and knowledge of the Morphophallus titanum. I will say that within this collection, we are collaborating with dozens of public gardens, both here in the United States and really around the world in different aspects. We are organizing a meeting coming up pretty soon to bring together experts in the genus Amorphophallus, so that we can establish what's called a meta collection, which is essentially a collection across gardens. So we look at trying to conserve, trying to get into cultivation, all of the species of the genus, not housed at a single institution, but housed collectively across multiple institutions, and then to back up those collections at multiple institutions as well. A local collaboration that we have, changing topics entirely here, but still within the sort of within horticultural science, is with a professor at the University of Maryland. And this is to study the impacts of different plantings on green roofs, looking at both the impacts on water runoff, water absorption of the roofs, and also the temperature of the roof as well. And what we found, preliminary results indicate that planting a mix that includes quite a few native plants, and especially native grasses, actually allows the roof to absorb much more water during rain events, and also has a greater lowering of the temperature impact on these roofs than a traditional just sedum mix on green roofs does. We also had a horticulturist who's actually now gone on to Longwood Gardens that was breeding cannas, and he developed many new cultivars of cannas by crossing about 15 to 20 crosses every year, and then selecting the best of those crosses to keep them for the next year, and then crossing them back again. He also introduced 2 wild species into his crosses as well, with the goal of just getting a greater diversity of leaf and flower colors and shapes, and different variegations for these plants. So it's quite successful, and really resulted in some really wonderful cannas. All right, so the third broad category of science that I'll talk about happening at public gardens is conservation. And I'll just say that I've been talking a lot about public gardens. There are also a lot of other organizations that collaborate with public gardens to advance conservation. One of those is the Center for Plant Conservation, and we are in close communication with them. We are members of the CPC, and what the CPC does is helps gardens and sort of monitors the success of gardens in doing rare species assessments, and also monitoring of the populations of rare species, and restoring the habitats of the plants that they're monitoring, and in repopulating in some cases, or adding to the population of these rare plants. And this is done both ex situ and in situ, which means out of nature and in nature. So both in cultivation at public gardens and other research institutions, and also within the natural lands that they manage. CPC is a nationwide organization, and also has some partners in other countries as well. And they have over 80 institutional conservation partners. They operate in over 30 states and territories, and they collaborate with over 300 conservation officers in those areas. So within conservation, there are many different approaches that gardens take. Some of them have wild lands, natural lands that they manage. Some are fully dedicated to native plants. So some examples are the Native Plant Trust Garden in the Woods in Massachusetts, a Mount Cubis Center, which is here in the Mid-Atlantic, the California Botanic Garden, which is of course in California. But there's many gardens that their entire collection, all of their collection, are native plants, or in some cases also the cultivars of native plants. And many more gardens, though, have sort of sub-gardens or areas within their garden that focus on native plants. So here at the US Botanic Garden, we have a regional garden that features plants from the Mid-Atlantic region. And as promised, I'm going to talk a lot about partnerships, and with a focus on the partnerships that we are involved in here at the US Botanic Garden. We, as a federal entity, are really a hub of collaboration and partnership throughout the public garden community in the United States and really around the world, and also with their partnering conservation organizations like the CPC and like several others that I'll talk about in the next few slides. So these are in no particular order, but I'm starting with a collaboration that we did with the New York City Department of Parks and Rec to establish a Mid-Atlantic regional seed bank called MARS-B. And this was really the first seed bank focused on the Mid-Atlantic region. And it's still in operation today. Actually, when I was at Brooklyn Botanic Garden, I collected seeds that contributed to this seed bank. You may have heard of other seed banks around the world, things like the Millennium Seed Bank, which is at Kew, or Svalbard, which is this global seed bank in northern Norway. There's also a fairly new one that's been established in South Korea. And most countries have seed banks. And seed banks, I don't have to tell you guys about it. You know about seed banks. I'm sure you all contributed to seed banks, but they really are so important, not just for the plants that we use as people, but also for native plants and for both the study of native plants and also just ensuring native plants survive into the future as well. All right, another collaboration that we have is with the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center and Smithsonian Gardens, and that was to establish the North American Orchid Conservation Center. And this is an alliance now of over 60 gardens, landowners, researchers, educators, and citizens that are all dedicated to conserving the over 230 species of native orchids in the United States and Canada. This organization is doing a lot of seed collecting, collecting also the fungal associates of the seeds, which is really important in orchid propagation. It's quite hard, if not impossible, to propagate orchids just from the seed. You have to have the fungi that occur with them naturally in the wild to help those seeds germinate, because the seeds are so small they actually don't have the nutrient tissue that they need to even germinate. In some cases, they have to have the fungus attached to them to help them get the nutrients that they need. Also, I mentioned GGI Gardens, the Global Genome Initiative Gardens. This was established by Smithsonian. This is a collaboration that we have ongoing with them, but also with the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. And this initiative, the GGI initiative, is to really preserve the genomic diversity of all organisms. And the gardens part of that initiative is really focused on, of course, preserving plant genomic diversity. And the idea here is to collect samples, tissue samples, and also herbarium samples. So they're pressing plants and drying them, but also freezing tissue and preserving tissue in a different sort of special dried condition with silica gel. And that is for future studies, so that people, when they need a sample of this plant, they can come to tissue banks and to herbaria to get collections that have already been collected for their use. We also have a collaboration with, or we had a collaboration with the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center and the American Society of Landscape Architects to develop the Sustainable Sites Initiative. And this is a certification program for sustainable landscaping that is very similar to LEED certification for buildings. If you're familiar with LEED certification for buildings, where it's, talking about the sort of sourcing of materials, the energy use of the building, the water use of the building, et cetera. Very similar with sites. So Sustainable Sites has 5 areas that it focuses on: water use, plants, both the types of the plants and the sourcing of the plants, the soil health, the materials that you're sourcing, so preferentially sourcing those locally and also sustainably, and then also human health, so the impacts of visiting that space on people and the impacts of that space on people. So capturing the water that falls in these places, planting native plants, sourcing those plants locally, et cetera. This Sustainable Sites is now administered through the U.S. Green Building Council, which is the same organization that administers LEED certification for buildings. We also worked with Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center on a sort of a spin-off collaboration to develop a home gardener version of sites. So this program is really geared toward you all, really anybody who is out there growing plants, maybe putting a garden in, and it kind of goes through different ways to make sure that that's being done sustainably. It has the same 5 areas as sites, but then also added a pollinator module as well. So you can be thinking about pollinator health in addition. Oh, and I should say that program is now actually run by Colorado State University, and they are, this is right now it's in English, but they've been translating it into Spanish as well. And they have actually been training municipal landscaping crews in Colorado to use these principles in their municipal landscape maintenance. And then there's 3 organizations with whom we have a lot of collaborations. And so I sort of lumped these 3 together because much of the work that we've done has involved more than one of them. And these are the U.S. Office for Botanic Gardens Conservation International, or BGCI, NatureServe, which is a nonprofit organization based actually in the DC area that does the conservation assessments for U.S. native plants. And they contribute this knowledge to really the global knowledge of plant conservation, and are the sort of official entity that does our conservation assessments, and it's what the federal government uses as well. Also, Morton Arboretum, which is based in Chicago. And as I said, lots of different partnerships with them. Our work with BGCI spans back many years and has resulted in many different conservation assessments and different strategies, both for us here at the U.S. Botanic Garden, but also for the United States, and in some cases for North America. As you can see here, this is the North American Botanic Garden strategy for plant conservation, and they are still quite engaged on the newer strategies in that area. Some other partnerships that we've done with these 3 entities has developed the first comprehensive threat assessment of all 881 tree species that are native to the lower 48 U.S. states. That resulted in the finding that over 11% of these native tree species are threatened for extinction. This study contributed significantly to a larger effort to really do this on a global scale. And that was the global tree assessment, the state of the world's trees that you can see here. And a sort of a spin-off follow-up collaboration from the tree assessments that we did in the US is a funding opportunity. So if you are somebody who would love to collect seeds from plants and you're collaborating with some other entities to do so, check this out. The sort of requirements for submitting are, you can follow that QR code or type in that ARBNet email address there. Awards range from $3,000 to $5,000, and we're accepting proposals in the second round until August 15th of this year. And the focus of this is the plants, the trees, native trees into the US that we've identified as being either completely not in cultivation or only represented by 5 or fewer collections within cultivation. And we're able to assess that because of the work that we did looking at these native trees, 881 native trees in the US, but also because of a really wonderful database that's maintained by Botanic Gardens Conservation International and their plant search database. All right, some other products from collaboration are, from this collaboration are the conservation assessment of plants that are known only from a single site, these single site endemic plants, so things that are so rare that there's just a single occurrence of them. Also, collaborative research with many different scientists from several different public gardens, from Smithsonian, from several universities, from USDA, looking at better understanding and conserving the native US grape species. US native grapes actually saved the grape industry in Europe by serving as rootstocks for those plants when there was a major pest that was coming through that was destroying the grapevines, and there was natural resistance to that pest by the native grapes. And they're just really obviously an important part of our economy and also an important part of our flora. Also working with the Morton Arboretum on the global oak conservation, on the Global Conservation Consortium for Oak. And this is a collaborative effort across the world that is bringing together scientists studying oaks to advance the conservation and understanding of oaks around the world. And of course, we have a collaboration with Seed Savers and the Heirloom Collard Project. So this last year, we actually just harvested them about a month ago. We were growing a single cultivar of collards in isolation of other cultivars. So we only grew the one in our kitchen garden, and we are here in Capitol Hill where there are not a lot of any other collards being grown super nearby. We use this opportunity to really engage the public both online and also in in-person programming. The resulting fruits from these were just harvested and dried, and actually I believe it was just yesterday that we were pulling the seeds out of them. So really happy to contribute to this awesome project and to be in partnership with Seed Savers on this. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about facilities, and I hope you all are putting some good questions in the chat. So awesome facilities at public gardens, including conservatories and outdoor gardens, where we're able to display plants and interpret them to the public, educate people about conservation, horticulture, et cetera, and also to be able to keep these plants in cultivation. The outdoor gardens that we have here at USBG, as I mentioned earlier, grow native plants both from the Mid-Atlantic and also the Southeast and Southwest. We also have this wonderful kitchen garden where we grow quite a bit of produce and transfer that produce to local area food banks. And then we also grow plants from all over the world, so we can really showcase the global flora as well. Many public gardens, almost all public gardens, have greenhouses as well, whether they are for research or just to grow up crops for their displays or to maintain their collections that when they're not on display in their conservatories. Our greenhouse facility is off-site and it's quite large. It's about an 85,000 square foot greenhouse. Many gardens also have laboratories where they're doing some of that systematics work that I mentioned, including phylogenetics, so looking at the evolutionary relationships of plants. Also, some do genomics, studying the functionality of genes. Some study anatomy, and there's quite a bit of gardens that do micropropagation and other plant propagation. So studying the propagation of rare plants or plants that are just really difficult to bring into cultivation. We've got some really awesome projects here at the US Botanic Garden that hopefully in the coming months you'll get to hear more about as our success is growing in those. Many gardens also have herbaria. In fact, so herbaria are natural history collections of plants. And in fact, most of the world's largest herbaria are at gardens, led by the New York Botanical Garden and also a Natural History Museum in Paris, but also the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, Missouri Botanical Garden, have very large herbaria, as do many other gardens around the world. Gardens also are, massively engaged in training engagement. I've talked about this a little bit, and I'm going to give you just a few examples here from US Botanic Garden and a couple of other gardens. Botanical training really begins. We used to have programs for babies and their caregivers. So people literally walking around with a baby in one of those like chest carriers, but certainly our programming starts in pre-K and really goes through retirement. You're never too old or too young to learn about plants, whether it's just like, oh, that strawberry tastes good, or hey, it's a member of the Rosaceae family, everything in between. And really, gardens offer very, informal science education, just short-term engagement opportunities if you're visiting a garden, all the way to certificate programs in adult education, all the way through to graduate degrees as well. Most of those, actually, pretty much all public gardens that give graduate degrees are doing so in collaboration with universities. We have, this is just a few pictures from my experience. The picture on the left there is a 7-year-old who was really just a giant plant nerd, and I brought her out to the production facility after meeting her one day in the conservatory. On the top right there, these are two of my students that I had at Brooklyn Botanic Garden who were doing basically master's level research in my lab as juniors and seniors in high school. And then on the bottom right there, that's an expedition that I led to Papua New Guinea, where we had worked with a lot of different graduate students and local people from local communities to teach them more about plants and to give them field experiences and just cultural experiences as well. But all of the other displays and exhibits that we do at public gardens can also be opportunities for scientific engagement. So this is the picture I showed earlier of our holiday show from a few years ago. It is a train display. And when I first came here to the garden, one of the first things I said is our theme for the train show is every year going to be connected to plant science. That's, moving forward. As long as I'm here, we're connecting it to plant science. And so we do that really well. So this exhibit was actually on agriculture. We had some awesome discovery cards talking about agriculture, also talking about the botanical materials that are used to make these models. We had scenes from all over the world featuring lots of different types of agriculture. So here we've got a little bog harvesting cranberries, and we've got some vertical farming in Scandinavia represented. And these models are all made out of plant material as well. So we're not only able to interpret and educate the public about the kinds of agriculture that they're depicting, but also about the plants that are actually used to make the models. And while we have people here for holiday shows, we like to have signs up for them to learn more about the plants. These are some interpretive signs that we placed along. We used to have a line that you had to wait in to get into the conservatory. So we placed these signs along the line when we had a pollinator theme for our holiday show. People are also captive audience when they're using the restroom facilities. And so many years ago, we developed these signs that have a theme appropriate for the location where they were posted on the back side of restroom facilities and on the walls above urinals as well. So while you're there, you can learn about plants and their interesting connections to poo. We also like to teach people about plants by showing them parts of plants that maybe they've never even thought about before, certainly have never seen. This was a really wonderful collaboration that we did with the Land Institute in Kansas, where they grew up these plants. These are a combination of some of their perennial crops, some native plants to the prairies, and some traditional agricultural annuals as well. And just to show the difference in the volume and the depth of their root masses. And so those biggest ones where you can see they're sort of looped back up, these are the native prairie plants and some of the perennial crops, and the really short roots on the sides there, those are some of the annual crops. And we got to teach people about the diversity of these plants in the prairies and the importance of the growing plants with perennial plants and the importance of growing plants with deep roots, especially in the prairies, but really elsewhere as well. And also the science of these. So the difference between, a rhizome and a root and, looking at the different structures, the morphology of these plants. And we do this in so many different ways, as I said, from informal opportunities in the garden to engage with experts on different plants. The one on the right there is actually two different botanical illustrators where we brought them in and had them either talking about the plants that they illustrated, or in the case in the bottom right picture there, bringing in botanical illustrators sort of that came to the garden for about a week or two and did their their illustrations in a gallery space and answered questions from the public as they were doing their art. We also have quite a bit of online programs as well, and where we're able to engage the public and answer their questions about how they can grow their plants, how they grow their food plants, their ornamentals, etc. And just a few examples kind of from my past and from some of the collaborations that we have at US Botanic Gardens. This is an arboretum that I volunteered at when I was in grad school at LSU. And while there, I was able to do a plant inventory of every plant growing in the arboretum. But I also got to connect the plants, the collections there, to the benchmarking for elementary education standards in the state of Louisiana, and to eradicate invasive species, and to then bring in a native meadow in that arboretum as well. And we also collected native plants from areas that were being developed and then sold them to the public to raise money for the arboretum. Denver Botanic Garden and also Desert Botanical Garden both have important herbaria. They both run molecular labs. They have very rich conservation programs, both in their living collections at the gardens, but also in managing and in sort of monitoring natural landscapes as well. And they use that information in very robust science education programs. The New York Botanical Garden, as I mentioned earlier, it's one of the largest herbaria in the world, and they have a very rich history for their scientific program at the garden. They have also a molecular lab. They have their own press, and they publish a couple of different scientific publications. They also have a certificate program in adult education in botany and also in botanical illustration, and they host several different professional organizations, including the American Society of Botanical Artists and the Torrey Botanical Society, which is the oldest botanical society in North America. There are so many more. I mean, there are over 600 public gardens in the United States, and so many of them are engaged in science and working with each other. All of the gardens that are on this page, we have collaborated with in some way, shared collections with them, advanced conservation, studied crop wild relatives, and our list of collaborators continues to grow. There are over 3,000 public gardens in the world. And this is really one of the reasons that we engage so closely with Botanic Gardens Conservation International, to really be able to reach gardens around the world in our collaborations. So what's the next step for science at public gardens? More collaboration, really to effectively utilize both our unique expertise and our unique collections and our access to wild lands to develop shared standard operating procedures. So to share the knowledge that we have, to sort of codify that knowledge in a way that it can be shared so that other people can replicate the successes that we've had in individual gardens. And I will say this is one of the most collaborative communities that I've ever experienced. And both the leaders of public gardens and the employees within public gardens are very open and willing to share their knowledge with each other to advance plant science knowledge and horticultural knowledge. And also, as I mentioned earlier, ensuring that there's a duplication of living collections so that our collection, if something happened to it, it wouldn't wipe out that plant from cultivation. We want to make sure that collections are duplicated around the world. So we missed it for this year, but stay tuned for next year. This is the QR code that'll take you to the website at Smithsonian Natural History for the National Botanical Symposium. This is a collaboration that we do with Smithsonian Gardens and with the Botany Department at the National Museum of Natural History here in DC. It is a free symposium. It's free to participate in it and free to attend as well. It's a really wonderful event. It's also hybrid, so you can attend it virtually. And next year's theme, stay tuned, but it's going to be somehow associated with America turning 250 years old. All right. That is it for me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Also happy for you to reach out to me if you have any questions. Definitely check out our website and check out our socials as well. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the questions if there are any in the chat. Oh, good. We got lots of questions.
All right. Hey, Susan, I gotta say, that was one of the most amazing presentations. I've got 2 pages of scribbles of my own personal questions, but I'm not going to jump in front of folks. So that was amazing. Thank you. So we've got a question, if someone's curious about, to hear more about how do you choose what you're accessioning into the Botanic Garden, with so many important and unique, beautiful plants in the world. How do you prioritize which ones you're going to maintain?
So we have a collections and curatorial policy that really governs what comes in and out of our collection. And our curator, our plant curator, who's Amy Highland, she is fully empowered to make decisions about what comes in and out of the collection in keeping with the collections policy. And the collections policy is governed by a collections committee that's made up of, leaders of the garden and members of the horticulture team, certainly Amy as well. And we have different focus collections. I mentioned some of those. We also have a general collection. So we'll bring a plant into the collection if it has a really interesting story or if it connects to people in some way, that even if it's not sort of an economic plant or a member of the other kind of focus collections that we have. But ultimately, the authority to decide what comes in and out is the curator's decision. So that's something that I pass to the curator. I cannot tell her what to bring into the collection as the director. It's her job to decide that.
Well, it sounds kind of similar to how we operate at Seed Savers Exchange. I don't get to decide what we pull into the collection. Somebody else does that, guided by policy. And yes, folks are more likely to tend to seeds that have a good story that are attached to them as well. So that's always a great part of that. Yeah, our good friend Spencer is wanting to know, with the size of the plant of the corpse plant, what infrastructure challenges do you have to overcome with that plant?
That's a great question. And I sort of had a slide on that I cut, but I'll say it's, we are very fortunate to have a very large production greenhouse to support our operations. And so we're able to have a very large collection of corpse flowers. It is a very limiting factor for many gardens. So even large public gardens that don't have, big support greenhouses can only have one or two, maybe three corpse flowers in their collection. Universities typically will have a single one. Smaller gardens certainly might have a single one. You have to have a greenhouse that can maintain high humidity and high temperature year round. You have to have a very tall greenhouse because as I said, those leaves can be, 15 feet tall. And the blooms could be, over 9 feet tall. So you have to have a lot of space that you've got really good environmental controls. And that's just not a common thing for most gardens. I will say that large collection that we have, we share that out. So we just transferred a corpse flower to Norfolk Botanic Garden. We gave one previously to Longwood. We've had a couple on display at Smithsonian Gardens. And we're continuing to share those out. We just actually are growing up a bunch of the seeds that resulted from a germination that we did last year, and we'll be sharing those seedlings out with gardens and universities. So lots of facilities are needed. Really good environmental controls.
Yeah, a lot to that. Yeah, and so Brianna had a question. The corpse plant is just way too cool and fascinating. You mentioned the male and female flowers open at different times to avoid self-pollination. Do you know how many corpse plants can be blooming in their native habitat within pollination range of each other at a time? She just imagines there not being many flowers like this blooming at any one point. So super curious about that.
It kind of depends on the species. So, I mean, if, not interrupted by people, which is not the case for most corpse flowers. There's lots of different species of Amorphophallus. So Amorphophallus titanum is threatened in the wild. So its population has been quite reduced from development and other pressures on that species. And so you'd have many fewer blooming now at any given time than you would have had historically. I have seen other species of Amorphophallus in the wild where there's just like a sea of them. You every 4 steps you're tripping over one. I mean, wow. Just tons and tons of them. Those are much smaller ones in my experience. So the corpse flower, I mean, there's a reason that the stench will travel a mile away, right? Because they're not typically going to be really close together, especially now. So it's really important for them to volatilize those compounds and get them out really far away so that they can attract a pollinator that's already visited another blooming corpse flower.
Yeah, and with that, how does the public know, hey, this is the time to go see the flower, smell the stench, is there a USBG alert?
Yeah.
Come now.
So, it's amazing. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of them. Last year we put 4 on display that were blooming. And you'd think that the worry is sort of that you flood the market and then people are like, oh, it's just another corpse flower. So far that has not happened. Mm-hmm. And even if we kind of slow roll it and just put it out on display, don't say anything, word of mouth travels and media will start reaching out. Oh, I want to come do a morning show there, So the media coverage for these things is always high. People are just really interested in them. So even if we are not pushing out to the media, a press release, etc., they will come to us and we'll end up having a big, sort of a big communications effort around it just because of the interest. So, but typically, if we want people to know, and we really want to bring in, tons of people, we'll do a press release. We'll reach out to media contacts, put it on social media as it's coming up to bloom. So we've got several weeks, 3 or so weeks usually, when you can see the spathe around the spadix, so that outer sort of thing that is going to open up and sort of be a trumpet shape. There's several weeks where all of the bracts have fallen away, and you can see that it's coming. So we put it on display at that point, so people know it's the clock is ticking.
It's time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Cindy would like to know, how have your visitors responded and engaged through the collard collaboration with us here at Seed Savers Exchange? And are people interested in the crop with a rich history?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done a couple of online programs, and we've done some engagements in the kitchen garden as well, and they've been very popular. Actually, you can watch that recorded program on our YouTube channel that we did with sort of the people who started the collard project, heirloom collard project. Yeah, it's been just really, people have been really engaged in it, really interested. Anytime we do a hands-on tasting in our kitchen garden, it's just super popular. So yeah, it's been a really fun project. And I will say, the garden, employees of the garden have responded really, really well to this. It's been a really fun project for us. So, public engagement aside, which has been great, just our own employees' enthusiasm about this has been really high.
That's great. I've loved working with Amanda,
Yeah.
the horticulturist and in charge of that. Yeah, she's been fantastic to work with and enthusiastic, and folks get crazy over collards. So
They do. They're
and y'all,
delicious.
yeah. And y'all kind of paved the way. We've got Emily Kofi at the Atlanta Botanic Garden, and Tanner there is growing some collards with us, and now we just sent collard seeds to the Denver Botanic Garden. So thanks for
That's
paving the
awesome.
way to get collards in Botanic Gardens. So that's been a fantastic journey, and collaboration, partnership with
Yeah.
y'all, as you talk about. So I was just personally curious, what's been one of your favorite expeditions or collection events that you've been able to do in your experiences?
Wow. I mean, I think my trip to New Guinea was probably, it was just really amazing. That was a great collaboration with the Botanical Research Institute of Texas, with Conservation International. So we had funding from them to go. And I was at Brooklyn Botanic Garden at the time, and also several scientists, 2 scientists from the New York Botanical Garden came on it as well. But more importantly, we collaborated with a really wonderful professor and a graduate student, and two sort of field assistants in New Guinea that were on the expedition on the boats. We surveyed the flora in the Louisiana archipelago, which is in the southeast, off the southeast coast of New Guinea and Milne Bay province. And it was amazing. It was 5 weeks. We were on the boat for 3 weeks, coming onto land and whatnot, and just got to really engage with so many awesome people in the local communities. It was really, really awesome.
That's
Learned a
great.
lot.
That's fun. That's fun. Yeah. Well, it was talking, you were talking about collaborations and people you work with. It was just, I was thinking the other day, I was actually chatting with a fellow at the Lady Bird Johnson, and you work with them. We've also been collaborating with them around okra. So we just sent them some
Oh, cool.
okra. They're starting to get into some vegetables and working with crops that are from Texas and who have been stewarded in Texas, and seeing how they perform there. So we have some like partners.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
and then another thing that kind of struck me is poison ivy and mangoes.
Mhm.
In that, what's more poisonous than poison ivy?
Well, I mean, poison ivy, causes dermatitis, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of plants that will kill you. So poison ivy, unless you have a severe allergy and you burn it and inhale it, probably not going to kill you. I mean, I think the only cases I've ever seen is when somebody has a massive allergy and they've inhaled, and that's really bad. But I mean, I would say ricin is probably, it's from, castor bean. That's probably the most poisonous plant. But there are quite a few that will kill you. That one, there's nothing to do about it. There's no treatment except for just lots of morphine to make you more comfortable. And you die quickly, and it's horrible. But there's a lot of nasty things out there. And of course, there's a lot of really poisonous plants that are medicinal plants too. It's all about the dosage, right?
Yeah, I actually, old timer I worked with for a long time would grow castor beans, right?
Yeah.
And he would take the seeds and throw them down different holes if he thought his groundhogs were down there, and different things like that. And so that was his way of fighting against groundhogs.
Critter control. Oh my
yeah,
God.
critter control there. So that's fantastic. So we've got someone coming in asking, so they're working with Youth Climate Village in Cameroon. Are there any opportunities for us to collaborate, especially around knowledge sharing and resource mobilization?
So, yeah, saw that. So I'm going to put in the chat a link to our website that has resources that are just free on our website, different manuals for, utilizing greenhouses and education spaces, to setting up school gardens, to setting up youth entrepreneurship programs, etc. So I will drop that in there. But also I will say that the Missouri Botanical Garden has a field station. I believe it's still active in Cameroon, and some scientists that are stationed there, that at least were stationed there. So, and they have quite a few people that are experts in the flora of Cameroon. So that might be a good kind of outreach, is to check with Missouri Botanical Garden to sort of see what they do. We, as part of the federal government, have a little bit of, it's not the easiest for us to collaborate with foreign government entities. We do so with like US offices of international organizations, that kind of thing, but it's not really a collaboration opportunity directly with us. But we do have a lot of resources that are free to the public. We also have a plant hotline that anyone can reach out to ask about plants, and we'll get back to you on that.
Cool.
Sure, but I'll find that. I'll get that link in there.
Thank you. And I guess we'll do this last one here, because we're just a hair over time. Like I said, I could go with you all day, Susan. So maybe next time I'm there, we'll have to have lunch, and I'll pick your brain all day. But so Maddie says, this is fascinating, and any tips for urban suburban dwellers looking to make their front yard visible a garden or more engaging / interpretive garden for the community. Now, I know that in our collaboration with y'all and Lola, who's the urban ag specialist for y'all, with the community gardens we've been collaborating with, signage was kind of a big thing. And so, people just passing by their garden get caught by a sign, and that starts the engagement, and just the same with y'all have out front. Yeah, I guess maybe speaking to that, like, what is signage? And yeah, someone could put something in the front yard next to the sidewalk, right?
Yeah, and there's also some really good national programs. I'm trying to remember who. It's not Fish and Wildlife. And different municipalities also will have like certification programs for pollinator gardens. And those often come with a sign that they give you that you can post in your garden. So if you have a garden that's really specifically designed for attracting pollinators, then you can register it either nationally or with your state or local government, and then get an interpretive sign from them. One of my favorite ways to do this, though, is I'm sure you've all seen those free libraries, right? So I have one of my employees actually does a free plants sort of thing in her front yard. So it's a case, she does it both, like she cuts daffodils and so people can get cut flowers. She collects seeds and does that. When she has like extra tomatoes, when she's put in her vegetable garden or whatever, she'll put those out for people to take with growing instructions. So she'll print out like, here's your instructions of how to be successful with this plant that you're taking. And it's great, her neighbors know her for this, and they come and get plants from her. So I think that's another really kind of interesting way to help engage and get people excited about plants and share your knowledge.
Yeah, it reminds me of our germination tech Natalie, who is, I know she's going bonkers listening to you because she's worked in Botanic Gardens, is a big fan of what y'all do. But she does that in our office with cacti. She is a big fan and other plants, always just giving away plants and what I say, cutting taters off of something to propagate and give to other folks. So it's just a great way to, one of my favorite gifts and just a great way to just talk about plants and get people kind of amazed by it. Now I have them growing in my house, and so always makes me think of her. So anyway, like I said, we could go on, just tons of praises and wonderful things in the chat just about this presentation, and I appreciate, with all that you have going on, obviously taking the time to get with our audience and share all the wonderful work y'all are doing. So thank you so much, and I just look forward to our continued collaboration and getting to just understand more of all the wonderful things y'all do there.
Awesome. I do as well. And thank you so much. It was an honor to be here.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And thank you to our audience for joining us for this third and final day. And yes, another special thanks to Dr. Pell and all the amazing work that the folks at the US Botanic Garden are doing. And so just as a reminder, please join us for the 50th anniversary in-person conference at Seed Savers Exchange in Decorah, Iowa. It's going to be this August 8th and 9th. We're coming up. We're just under a month away. We have such an exciting lineup for the special two-day event. We really hope to see you there. Please stay tuned, because up next is Addressing Climate Change Through Green Agricultural Solutions, starting in just about 15 minutes. Thanks so much, folks.